Hello. Nice to meet you. As usual, I'm stupid. I didn't set everything properly before I went live, obviously. So stupid. Anyway, as you can see in my on the title, we're reading a book today. I know. Surprising. Scary. Is this real life? What? Yeah, it is. I'm not gonna read for long, about 2 hours, I think, because I don't wanna overextend myself, as I always do. I don't know why I do that. But you know, sometimes when you get into like the reading mode, you just feel like, yeah, I can do this. I can read forever. But you can't. Realistically, you just can't. You die reading that way. Anyway, lip balm. I my avatar is cosplaying as someone from the 50s because it's where the book is based on. When the book was based on. So if you guys don't know anything about Sylvia Plath, she's a poet, a prolific poet, writer, novelist. She doesn't really write novel that much, to be honest, and the only novels that she wrote is basically like kind of like an autobiography, semi-autobiography, with like name change and maybe like, but a lot of her work is poetry. I haven't delved into her poetry that much yet. Probably I would like all of them because I don't know, I like poems. I'm pretentious like that. Um, yeah. So we are reading. We're going to read The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. Let's just go. I'm just gonna assume that nobody knows much about Sylvia Plath, so I'm going to like just give her like a little biography of hers. Sylvia Plath was born in Boston, Massachusetts, and studied at Smith College. In 1955, she went to Cambridge University on a Fulbright scholarship, where she met and later married Ted Hughes. Ted Hughes, one of the biggest asshole in poetry world, I would say. She published one collection of poems in her lifetime, The Colossus, and a novel, The Bell Jar. Her collected poems, which contains her poetry written from 1956 until her death, was published in 1981 by her husband, who has her estate, and awarded the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry, which is very sad because when you think about it, she only get the like many artists, they only get the recognition that they get once they're dead. And in this case, Sylvia Plath unfortunately died by suicide. Not a very good death, not a very pretty death. But then, is there any pretty death in this world, really? Even the most, like, even the most usual death, like let's say, death by old age or something, it's still kind of twisted in some way or another. I have very different view of death after certain thing that happened last year. Yep. But yeah, she was only 30 years old when she died. 30 years old, she published one book and one collection of poems. And then after that, whatever that was published, her journals, obviously, I don't think in her life she would say yes to publishing her journals, but unfortunately her husband has her estate, so her husband fucking published her journal. And then published a bunch of poems that he selected. And then even her mother make money off her after she's dead, like publish poems about her or publish the letters that she sent to and fro Sylvia. So isn't it sad that true artists only get recognition after they're dead, and then after that they are being used as some kind of a dead cow cash, that dead cash cow? It's so sad when you think about it. That's why people say don't think about anything. Don't use your brain. Just be stupid. You'll be fine. Yep. Anyway, let's read. I know I look different, but I'm still who I am. Let's read. Today, we are reading Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar, Chapter 1. It was a queer, sultry summer. The summer they electrocuted the Rosenbergs. And I didn't know what I was doing in New York. I'm stupid about executions. The idea of being electrocuted makes me sick. And that's all there was to read about in the papers. Goggle-eyed headlines staring up at me at every street corner and at the fusty peanut-smelling mouth of every subway. It had nothing to do with me, but I couldn't help wondering what it would be like being burned alive all along your nerves. I thought it must be the worst thing in the world. New York was bad enough. By 9 in the morning, the fake country wet freshness that somehow seeped in overnight evaporated like the tail end of a sweet dream. Mirage gray at the bottom of their granite canyons, the hot streets wavered in the sun, the car tops sizzled and glittered, and the dry, cindery dust blew into my eyes and down my throat. I kept hearing about the Rosenbergs over the radio, and at the office till I couldn't get them out of my mind. It was like the first time I saw a cadaver. For weeks afterwards, the cadaver's head, or what there was left of it, floated up behind my eggs and bacon at breakfast and behind the face of Buddy Willard, who was responsible for my seeing it in the first place. Pretty soon, I felt as though I was carrying that cadaver's head around me on a string, like some black, noseless balloon stinking of vinegar. I knew something was wrong with me that summer, because all I could think about was the Rosenbergs and how stupid I had been to buy all those uncomfortable, expensive clothes, hanging limp as fish in my closet, and how all the little successes I had totted up so happily at the college fizzled to nothing outside the sleek marble and plate glass fronts along Madison Avenue. I was supposed to be having the time of my life. I was supposed to be the envy of thousands of other college girls just like me all over America who wanted nothing more than to be tripping about in those same size 7 patent leather shoes I had bought in Bloomingdale's one lunch hour with a black patent leather belt and black patent leather pocketbook to match. And when my picture came out in the magazine, the 12 of us were working on drinking martinis in skimpy imitation silver lame bodies stuck onto a big fat cloud of white tulle on some starlight roof in the company of several anonymous young men with all-American bone structures hired or loaned for the occasion. Everybody would think I must be having a real whirl. Look what can happen in this country, they would say. A girl lives in some out-of-the-way town for 19 years, so poor she can't afford a magazine, and then she gets a scholarship to college and wins a prize here and a prize there and ends up steering New York like her own private car. Only, I wasn't steering anything. Not even myself. I just bumped from my hotel to work and to parties and from parties to my hotel and back to work like a numb trolley bus. I guess I should have been excited the way most of the other girls were, but I couldn't get myself to react. I felt very, very still and very empty, the way the eye of a tornado must feel, moving dully along in the middle of the surrounding hullabaloo. There were 12 of us at the hotel. We had all won a fashion magazine contest, writing essays and stories and poems and fashion blurbs, and as prizes they gave us jobs in New York for a month, expenses paid, and piles of free bonuses like ballet tickets and passes to fashion shows and hairstylings at the famous expensive salon, and chances to meet successful people in the field of our desire and advice about what to do with our particular complexions. I still have the makeup kit they gave me, fitted out for a person with brown eyes and brown hair, an oblong of brown mascara with a tiny brush, and a round basin of blue eyeshadow just big enough to dab the tip of your finger in, and 3 lipsticks ranging from red to pink, all cased in the same little gilt box with a mirror on one side. I also have a white plastic sunglasses case with colored shells and sequins and a green plastic starfish I sewn onto it. I realized we kept piling up these presents because it was as good as free advertising for the firms involved. But I couldn't be cynical. I got such a kick out of all those free gifts showering onto us. For a long time afterward, I hid them away. But later, when I was all right again, I brought them out, and I still have them around the house. I use the lipstick now and then, and last week I cut the plastic starfish off the sunglasses case for the baby to play with. So there were 12 of us at the hotel, in the same wing on the same floor, in single rooms, one after the other, and it reminded me of my dormitory in college. It wasn't a proper hotel. I mean, a hotel where both men and women mix about here and there on the same floor. This hotel, the Amazon, was for the women only, and they were mostly girls my age with wealthy parents who wanted to be sure their daughters would be living where men couldn't get at them and deceive them. And they were all going to posh secretarial schools like Katie Gibbs, where they had to wear hats and stockings and gloves to class, or they had just graduated from places like Katie Gibbs and were secretaries to executives and junior executives and simply hanging around in New York waiting to get married to some career man or another. These girls look awfully bored to me. I saw them on the sunroof, yawning and painting their nails and trying to keep up their Bermuda tans, and they seemed bored as hell. I talked with one of them, and she was bored with yachts and bored with flying around in aeroplanes and bored with skiing in Switzerland at Christmas and bored with the men in Brazil. Girls like that make me sick. I'm so jealous I can't speak. 19 years, and I hadn't been out of New England except for this trip to New York. It was my first big chance, but here I was, sitting back and letting it run through my fingers like so much water. I guess one of my troubles was Doreen. I had never known a girl like Doreen before. Doreen came from a society from a society girls' college down south and had bright white hair standing out in a cotton candy fluff around her head and blue eyes like transparent agate marbles, hard and polished and just about indestructible, and a mouth set in a sort of perpetual sneer. I don't mean a nasty sneer, but an amused, mysterious sneer, as if all the people around her were pretty silly, and she could tell some good jokes on them if she wanted to. Doreen singled me out right away. She made me feel I was that much sharper than others, and she really was wonderfully funny. She used to sit next to me at the conference table, and when the visiting celebrities were talking, she would whisper witty sarcastic remarks to me under her breath. Her college was so fashion conscious, she said, that all the girls had pocketbook covers made out of the same material as their dresses, so each time they changed their clothes, they had a matching pocketbook. This kind of detail impressed me. It suggested a whole life of marvelous, elaborated decadence that attracted me like a magnet. The only thing Doreen ever bawled me out about was bothering to get my assignments in by a deadline. "What are you sweating over that for?" Doreen lounged in my bed in a peach silk dressing gown, filing her long nicotine yellow nails with an emery board, while I typed up the draft of an interview with a best-selling novelist. There was another thing. The rest of us had starched cotton summer 90s and quilted house coats, or maybe terry towels robes that double as beach coats. But Doreen wore these full-length nylon and lace jobs you could half see through, and dressing gowns the color of sin that stuck to her by some kind of electricity. She had an interesting, slightly sweaty smell that reminded me of those scallopy leaves of sweet fern you break off and crush between your fingers for the musk of them. "You know old JC won't give a damn if the story is in tomorrow or Monday." Doreen lit a cigarette and let the smoke flare slowly from her nostrils so her eyes were veiled. "JC's ugly as sin," Doreen went on coolly. "I bet that old husband of hers turned out all the lights before he gets near her, or he'll puke otherwise. JC was my boss, and I like her a lot, in spite of what Doreen said. She wasn't one of the fashion magazine gushers with fake lashes and giddy jewelry. JC had brains, so her plug ugly looks didn't seem to matter. She read a couple of languages and knew all the quality writers in the business. I tried to imagine JC out of her strict office suit and luncheon duty hat and in bed with her fat husband, but I just couldn't do it. I always had a terribly hard time trying to imagine people in bed together. JC wanted to teach me something. All the old ladies I ever knew wanted to teach me something, but I suddenly didn't think they had anything to teach me. I fitted the lid on my typewriter and clicked it shut. Doreen grinned. "Smart girl," she said. Somebody tapped on the door. "Who is it?" I didn't bother to get up. "It's me, Betsy. Are you coming to the party?" "I guess so." I still didn't go to the door. They imported Betsy right from Kansas with her bouncing blonde ponytail and sweetheart of Sigma Chi smile. I remember once the two of us were called over to the office of some blue-chin TV producer in a pinstripe suit to see if we had any angles he could build up for a program. And Betsy started to tell about the male and female corn in Kansas. She got so excited about that damn corn, even the producer had tears in his eyes. Only he couldn't use any of it, unfortunately, he said. Later, the beauty editor persuaded Betsy to cut her hair and made a cover girl out of her. And I still see her face now and then, smiling out of those, quote, PQ's wives wears BH rags ads. Betsy was always asking me to do things with her and the other girls as if she was trying to save me in some way. She never asked Doreen. In private, Doreen called her Pollyanna Cowgirl. Do you want to come in our cab? Betsy said through the door. Doreen shook her head. That's all right, Betsy, I said. I'm going with Doreen. Okay. I could hear Betsy padding off down the hall. We'll just go till we get the sick of it, Doreen told me, stubbing out her cigarette in the base of my bedside reading lamp. Then we'll go out on the town. Those parties they stage here remind me of those old dances in the school gym. Why do they always round out yallies? They're so stupid. Buddy Willard went to Yale, but now I thought of it. What was wrong with him was that he was stupid. Oh, he would manage to get good marks, all right, and to have an affair with some awful waitress on the Cape by the name of Gladys. But he didn't have one speck of intuition. Doreen had intuition. Everything she said was like a secret voice speaking straight out of my own bones. We were stuck in the theater hour rush. Our cab sat wedged in back of Betsy's cab and in front of a cab with 4 of the other girls, and nothing moved. Doreen looked terrific. She was wearing a strapless white lace dress zipped up over a snug corset affair that curved her in the middle and bulged her out again spectacularly above and below. And her skin had a bronzy polish under the pale dusting powder. She smelled strong as a whole perfume store. I wore a black shantung sheath that cost me $40. It was part of a buying spree I had with some of my scholarship money when I heard I was one of the lucky ones going to New York. This dress was cut so queerly that I couldn't wear any sort of a bra underneath it, but that didn't matter much as I was skinny and as a boy and barely rippled, and I liked feeling almost naked on a hot summer night. The city has faded my tan though. I look yellow like a Chinaman. Ordinarily, I would have been nervous about my dress and my odd color, but being with Doreen made me forget about my worries. I felt wise and cynical as all hell. Good morning! We're currently reading The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, Chapter 1. We're in the midst of Chapter 1. We just started about 15 minutes ago, so enjoy. When the man in the blue lumber shirt and black chinos and tooled leather cowboy boots started to stroll over to us from under the striped awning of the bar where he had been eyeing our cab, I didn't have any illusions. I knew perfectly well he would come for Doreen. He threaded his way out between the stopped cars and leaned engagingly on the sill of our open window. And what, may I ask, are 2 nice girls like you doing all alone in a cab on a nice night like this? He had a big, wide, white toothpaste ad smile. We're on our way to a party, as I blurted, since Doreen had gone suddenly dumb as a post and was fiddling in a blasé way with her white lace pocketbook cover. That sounds boring, the man said. Why don't you both join me for a couple of drinks in that bar over there? I have some friends waiting as well. He nodded in the direction of several informally dressed men slouching around under the awning. They had been following him with their eyes, and when he glanced back at them, they burst out laughing. The laughter should have warned me. It was kind of low, know-it-all snicker. but the traffic showed signs of moving again, and I knew that if I sat tight, in 2 seconds, I would be wishing I had taken this gift of a chance to see something of New York besides what the people on the magazine had planned out for us so carefully. "How about it, Doreen?" I said. "How about it, Doreen?" the man said, smiling his big smile. To this day, I can't remember what he looked like when he wasn't smiling. I think he must have been smiling the whole time. It must have been natural for him, smiling like that. "Well, all right," Doreen said to me. I opened the door and we stepped out of the cab just as it was edging ahead again and started to walk over to the bar. There was a terrible shriek of brakes followed by a dull thump-thump. "Hey, you!" Our cabbie was craning out of his window with a furious purple expression. "What do you think you're doing?" I'm sorry, that's my attempt of a Boston accent. I'm sorry. Sorry, I'm the mean. Sorry, I just cracked myself up. I'm stupid. Sorry, leave me alone. I'm sorry. What do you think you're doing? Oh my god. Stupid. Okay. He had stopped the cab so abruptly that the cat behind bumped smack into him, and we could see the 4 girls inside waving and struggling and scrambling up off the floor. Hello. We're currently reading The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. Chapter 1. We are in the midst of Chapter 1. Thank you. Sorry. The man laughed and left us on the curb and went back and handed a bill to the driver in the middle of a great honking and some yelling. And then we saw the girls from the magazine moving off in a row, one cab after another, like a wedding party with nothing but bridesmaids. "Come on, Frankie," the man said to one of his friends in the group, and a short, scrunty fellow detached himself and came into the bar with us. He was the type of fellow I can't stand. I'm 5'10" in my stocking feet, and when I am with little men, I stoop over a bit and slouch my hip, one up and one down, so I would look shorter, and I feel gawky and morbid as somebody in a sideshow. For a minute, I had a wild hope we might pair off according to size, which would line me up with the man who had spoken to us in the first place, and he cleared a good 6 feet. But he went ahead with Doreen and didn't give me a second look. I tried to pretend I didn't see Frankie dogging along at my elbow and sat close by Doreen at the table. It was so dark in the bar I could hardly make out anything except Doreen. With her white hair and white dress, she was so white she looked silver. I think she must have reflected the neons over the bar. I felt myself melting into the shadows like the negative of a person I had never seen before in my life. "Well, what will we have?" the man asked with a large smile. "I think I'll have an old-fashioned," Doreen said to me. Ordering drinks always floored me. I didn't know whiskey from gin and never managed to get anything I really liked the taste of. Buddy Willard and the other college boys I knew were usually too poor to buy hard liquor, or they scorned drinking altogether. It's amazing how many college boys don't drink or smoke. I seem to know them all. The farthest Buddy Willard ever went was buying us a bottle of Dubonnet, which he only did because he was trying to prove he could be aesthetic in spite of being a medical student. I'll have a vodka, I said. The man looked at me more closely. With anything? Just plain, I said. I always have it plain. I thought I might make a fool of myself by saying I would have it with ice or soda or gin or anything. I had seen a vodka ad once, just a glass full of vodka, standing in the middle of a snowdrift in a blue light, and the vodka looked clear and pure as water. So I thought, having vodka plain must be all right. My dream was someday ordering a drink and finding out it tasted wonderful. The waiter came up then. Then the man ordered drinks for the four of us. He looked so at home in the citified bar. In his ranch outfit, I thought he might well be somebody famous. Doreen wasn't saying a word. She only toyed with her cork placemat and eventually lit a cigarette. But the man didn't seem to mind. He kept staring at her the way people stare at the great white macaw in the zoo, waiting for her to say something human. The drinks arrived, and mine looked clear and pure, just like the vodka ad. What do you do? I asked the man. To break the silence shooting up around me, on all sides, thick as jungle grass. I mean, what do you do here in New York? Slowly and with what seemed a great effort, the man dragged his eye away from Doreen's shoulder. I'm a disc jockey, he said. You probably must have heard of me. The name's Lenny Shepherd. I know you, Doreen said suddenly. I'm glad about that, honey, the man said and burst out laughing. That'll come in handy. I'm famous as hell. Then Lenny Shepherd gave Frankie a long look. Say, where do you come up from? Frankie asked, sitting up with a jerk. What's your name? This here's Doreen. Lenny slid his hand around Doreen's bare arm and gave her a squeeze. What surprised me was that Doreen didn't let on she noticed what he was doing. She just sat there, dusky as a bleached blonde negress in her white dress, and sipped daintily at her drink. My name's Ellie Higginbottom, I said. I come from Chicago. After that, I felt safer. I didn't want anything I said or did that night to be associated with me and my real name and coming from Boston. Well, Ellie, what do you say we dance some? The thought of dancing with that little runt in his orange suit, elevator shoes, a mingy t-shirt, and droopy blue sports coat made me laugh. If there's anything I look down on, it's a man in a blue outfit. Black or gray, or brown even. Blue just makes me laugh. I'm sorry. I'm not in the mood, I said coldly, turning my back on him and hitching my chair over nearer to Doreen and Lenny. Those two looked as if they had known each other for years by now. Doreen was spooning up the hunks of fruit at the bottom of her glass with her spindly silver spoon, and Lenny was grunting each time she lifted the spoon to her mouth and snapping and pretending to be a dog or something, trying to get the fruit off the spoon. Doreen giggled and kept spooning up the fruit. I began to think vodka was my drink. At last, it didn't taste like anything, but it went straight down into my stomach like a sword swallower a sword and made me feel powerful and godlike. I better go now, Frankie said, standing up. I couldn't see him very clearly. The place was so dim, but for the first time I heard what a high, silly voice he had. Nobody paid him any notice. Hey, Lenny, you owe me something, remember, Lenny? You owe me something, don't you, Lenny? I thought it's odd Frankie should be reminding Lenny he owed him something in front of us, and we being perfect strangers. But Frankie stood there, saying the same thing over and over until Lenny dug into his pocket and pulled out a big roll of green bills and peeled one off and handed it to Frankie. I think it was $10. Shut up and scram. For a minute, I thought Lenny was talking to me as well, but then I heard Doreen say, I won't come unless Ellie comes. I had to hand it to her by the way she picked up my fake name. Oh, Ellie will come, won't you, Ellie? Lenny said, giving me a wink. Sure, I'll come, I said. Frankie had wilted into the night, so I thought I would string along with Doreen. I wanted to see as much as I could. I like looking on at other people in crucial situations. If there was a road accident or a street fight or a baby pickled in a laboratory jar for me to look at, I would stop and look so hard I never forgot it. I certainly learned a lot of things I never would have learned otherwise this way. And even when they surprised me or make me sick, I never let on, but pretended that that's the way I knew things were all the time. That was chapter 1. Get a sip of tea. Okay. Alright, let's go. Continue. We are currently reading The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, Chapter 2. I wouldn't have missed Lenny's place for anything. It was built exactly like the inside of a ranch, only in the middle of a New York apartment house. He had had a few partitions knocked down to make the place broaden out, he said, and then had them pine panel the walls and fit up a special pine panel bar in the shape of a horseshoe. I think the floor was pine paneled too. Great white bear skins lay about underfoot, and the only furniture was a lot of low beds covered in Indian rugs. Instead of pictures hung up on the walls, he had antlers and buffalo horns and a stuffed rabbit head. Lenny jutted a thumb at the meek little grey muzzle and stiff jackrabbit ears. Ran over that in Las Vegas, he said as he walked away across the room, his cowboy boots echoing like pistol shots. Acoustics, he said, and grew smaller and smaller until he vanished through a door in the distance. All at once, music started to come out of the air on every side. Then it stopped, and we heard Lenny's voice say, This is your 12 o'clock disc jockey, Lenny Shepherd, with a roundup of the tops in pops. Number 10 in the wagon train this week is none other than that little yellow-haired girl you have been hearing so much about lately. The one and only Sunflower. What a card, Doreen said. Isn't he a card? You bet, I said. Listen, Ellie, do me a favor. She seemed to think that Ellie was who I really was by now. Sure, I said. Stick around, will you? I wouldn't have a chance if you tried anything funny. Did you see that muscle? Doreen giggled. Lenny popped out of the back room. I got 20 grand's worth of recording equipment in there. He ambled over to the bar and set out 3 glasses and a silver ice bucket and a big pitcher and began to mix drinks from several different bottles. Terrific, huh? Lenny came over, balancing 3 glasses. Big drops Thank you. Thank you for joining our reading session. Please have a seat. Where was I? Big drops stood out on them like sweat, and the ice cubes jingled as they passed them around. Then the music twanged to a stop, and we heard Lenny's voice announcing the next number. Nothing like listening to yourself talk, say? Lenny's eyes lingered on me. Frankie vamoosed. You ought to have somebody. I'll call up one of those fellas. That's okay, I said. You don't have to do that. I didn't want to come straight out and ask for somebody several sizes larger than Frankie. Lenny looked relieved. So, just so's you don't mind, I wouldn't want to do wrong by a friend of Doreen's. He gave Doreen a big wide smile. Would I, honey bun? He held out a hand to Doreen, and without a word, they both started to jitterbug, still hanging on to their glasses. I sat cross-legged on one of the beds and tried to look devout and impassive like some businessman I once saw watching an Algerian belly dancer. But as soon as I leaned back against the wall under the stuffed rabbit, the bed started to roll out into the room. So I sat down on the bearskin on the floor and leaned back against the bed instead. My drink was wet and depressing. Each time I took a sip, it tasted more and more like dead water. Yeah, I've tasted cocktails like that. It's horrible. Around the middle of the glasses there was painted a pink lasso with yellow polka dots. I drank to about an inch below the lasso and waited a bit, and when I take another sip, the drink was up to lasso level again. Out of the air, Lenin's ghost voice boomed. Okay, that's gonna be like singing, so I'm not gonna. It's like, why did I ever leave Wyoming? I think it's like a singing. Two of them, didn't even stop jitterbugging during the intervals. I felt myself shrinking into a small black dot against all those red and white rocks and the pine paneling. I felt like a hole in the ground. There is something demoralizing about watching two people get more and more crazy about each other, especially when you are the only extra person in the room. It's like watching Paris from an express caboose heading in the opposite direction. Every second in the city gets smaller and smaller, only you feel it's really you getting smaller and smaller and lonelier, rushing away from all those lights and that excitement at about 1,000,000 miles an hour. Every so often, Lenny and Doreen would bang into each other and kiss and then swing back to take a long drink and close in on each other again. I thought I might just lie down on the bearskin and go to sleep until Doreen feel ready to go back to the hotel. Then Lenny gave a terrible roar. I sat up. Doreen was hanging on to Lenny's left earlobe with her teeth. Let go, you bitch! Lenny stooped, and Doreen went flying onto his shoulder, and her glass sailed out of her hand in a long wide arc and fetched up against the pine paneling with a silly tinkle. Lenny was still roaring and whirling round so fast I couldn't see Doreen's face. Good morning, Ando. We are currently reading Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar, Chapter 2. I noticed, in the routine way you notice the color of somebody's eyes, that Doreen's breasts had popped out of her dress and were swinging out slightly like full brown melons as she circled belly down on Lenny's shoulder, thrashing her legs in the air and screeching. And then both started to laugh and slow down, and Lenny was trying to bite Doreen's hip through her skirt. when I let myself out of the door before anything more could have happened and managed to get downstairs by leaning with both hands on the banister and half sliding the whole way. I didn't realize Lenny's place had been air conditioned until I wavered out onto the pavement. The tropical, stale heat the sidewalks had been sucking up all day hit me in the face like a last insult. I didn't know where in the world I was. For a minute, I entertained with the idea of taking a cab to the party after all, but decided against it because the dance might be over by now, and I didn't feel like ending up in an empty barn of a ballroom strewn with confetti and cigarette butts and crumpled cocktail napkins. I walked carefully to the nearest street corner, brushing the wall of the buildings on my left with the tip of one finger to steady myself. I looked at the street sign. Then I took my New York street map out of my pocketbook. I was exactly 43 blocks by 5 blocks away from my hotel. Walking has never fazed me. I just set out in the right direction, counting the blocks under my breath, and when I walked into the lobby of the hotel, I was perfectly sober and my feet only slightly swollen. But that was my own fault because I hadn't bothered to wear any stockings. The lobby was empty except for a night clerk dozing in his lead booth among the key rings and the silent telephones. I slid into the self-service elevator and pushed the button for my floor. The doors folded shut like a noiseless accordion. Then my ears went funny, and I noticed a big, smudgy-eyed Chinese woman staring idiotically into my face. It was only me, of course. I was appalled to see how wrinkled and used up I looked. "Hey, what do you mean, Sylvia?" Sorry. What do you mean? That was... Reread that. There wasn't a soul in the hall. I let myself into my room. It was full of smoke. At first I thought the smoke had materialized out of thin air as a sort of judgment. But then I remembered it was Doreen's smoke and pushed the button that opened the window vent. They had the windows fixed so you couldn't really open them and lean out. And for some reason this made me furious. By standing at the left of the window and laying on my cheek onto the woodwork, I could see downtown to where the UN balanced itself in the dark like a weird green Martian honeycomb. I could see the moving red and white lights along the drive and the lights of the bridges whose names I didn't know. The silence depressed me. It wasn't the silence of silence. It was my own silence. I knew perfectly well the cars were making a noise, and the people in them and behind the lit windows of the buildings were making a noise, and the river was making a noise, but I couldn't hear a thing. The city hung in my window, flat as a poster, glittering and blinking, but it might just as well not have been there at all, for all the good it did me. The china white beside telephone could have connected me up with things, but there it sat, dumb as a death's head. I tried to think of people I had given my phone number to, so I could make a list of all the possible calls I might be about to receive, but all I could think of was that I had given my phone number to Buddy Willard's mother so she could give it to a simultaneous interpreter she knew at the UN. I let out a small, dry laugh. I could imagine the sort of simultaneous interpreter Mrs. Willard would introduce me to when all the time she wanted me to marry Buddy, who was taking the cure for TB somewhere in upper New York State. Buddy's mother had even arranged for me to be given a job as a waitress at the TB Sanitarium that summer so Buddy wouldn't be lonely. She and Buddy couldn't understand why I chose to go to New York City instead. The mirror over my bureau seemed slightly warped and much too silver. The face in it looked like the reflection in a ball of dentist's mercury. I thought of crawling in between the bed sheets and trying to sleep, but that appealed to me about as much as stuffing a dirty, scrawled over letter into a fresh, clean envelope. I decided to take a hot bath. There must be quite a few things a hot bath won't cure, but I don't know many of them. Whenever I'm sad I'm going to die, or so nervous I can't sleep, or in love with somebody I won't be seeing for a week, I slump down just so far and then say, I'll go take a hot bath. I meditate in the bath. The water needs to be very hot. So hot you can barely stand putting your foot into it. Then you lower yourself down, inch by inch, till the water's up to your neck. I remember the ceilings over every bathtub I've stretched out in. I remember the textures of the ceilings and the cracks and the colors and the damp spots and the light fixtures. I remember the tubs too, the antique Griffin Lake tubs, the modern coffin-shaped tubs, and the fancy pink marble tubs overlooking indoor lily ponds, and I remember the shapes and the sizes of the water taps and the different sorts of soap holders. I never feel so much myself as when I'm in a hot bath. I lay in the tub on the 17th floor of this hotel for women only, high up over the jazz and push of New York, for near on to an hour, and I felt myself growing pure again. I don't believe in baptism or the waters of Jordan or anything like that, but I guess I feel about a hot bath the way those religious people feel about holy water. I said to myself, Doreen is dissolving, Lenny Shepherd is dissolving, Frankie is dissolving, New York is dissolving. They are all dissolving away, and none of them matter anymore. I don't know them. I have never known them, and I am very pure. All that liquor and those sticky kisses I saw and the dirt that settled on my skin on the way back is turning into something pure. The longer I lay there in the clear hot water, the purer I felt. And when I stepped out at last and wrapped myself in one of those big soft white hotel bath towels, I felt pure and sweet as a new baby. I don't know how long I had been asleep when I heard the knocking. I didn't pay any attention at first because the person knocking kept saying, Ellie, 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 let me in. And I didn't know any Ellie. Then another kind of a knock sounded over the first dull, bumping knock, a sharp tap, and another, much crisper voice said, Miss Greenwood, your friend wants you. And I knew it was Doreen. I swung to my feet and balanced dizzily for a minute in the middle of the dark room. I felt angry with Doreen for waking me up. All I stood a chance of getting out of that sad night was a good sleep, and she had to wake me up and spoil it. I thought if I pretended to be asleep, the knocking might go away and leave me in peace, but I waited, and it didn't. Ellie! Ellie, Ellie! The first voice mumbled, when the other voice went on hissing, Miss Greenwood! Miss Greenwood! Miss Greenwood! As if I had a split personality or something. Thank you. I opened the door and blinked out into the bright hall. I had the impression it was night and it wasn't day, but some lurid third interval that had suddenly slipped between them and would never end. Doreen slumped against the door jamb. When I came out, she toppled my arms, and I couldn't see her face because her head was hanging her head was hanging down on her chest, and her stiff blonde hair fell from its dark roots like a hula fringe. I recognized the short, squat, mustached woman in the black uniform as the night maid who ironed day dresses and party frocks in a crowded cubicle in our floor. I couldn't understand how she came to know Doreen and why she would want to help Doreen wake me up instead of leading her quietly back into her room. Seeing Doreen supported in my arms and silent except for a few wet hiccups, the woman strode away the hall to her cubicle with its ancient singer, sewing machine, and white ironing board. I wanted to run after her and tell her I had nothing to do with Doreen because she looked stern and hard-working and moral as an old-style European immigrant and reminded me of my Austrian grandmother. Let me lie down, let me lie down, Doreen was muttering. Let me lie down, let me lie down. I felt if I carried Doreen across the threshold into my room and helped her onto my bed, I would never get rid of her again. Her body was warm and soft as a pile of pillows against my arm, where she leaned her weight, and her feet, in their high spiked heels, dragged foolishly. She was much too heavy for me to budge down the long hallway. I decided the only thing to do was to dump her on the carpet and shut and lock my door and go back to bed. When Doreen woke up, she wouldn't remember what had happened and wouldn't think she must have passed out in front of my door while I slept, and she would get up of her and she would get up of her own accord and go sensibly back to her room. I started to lower Doreen gently on the green hall carpet, but she gave a low moan and pitched forward out of my arms. A jet of brown vomit flew from her mouth and spread in a large puddle at my feet. Suddenly, Doreen grew even heavier. Her head drooped forward into the puddle, the wisps of her blonde hair dabbling in it like tree roots in a bog, and I realized she was half asleep. I drew back. I felt half asleep myself. I made a decision about Doreen that night. I decided I would watch her and listen to what she said, but deep down, I would have nothing at all to do with her. Deep down, I would like to be loyal to Betsy and her innocent friends. It was Betsy I resembled at heart. Quietly, I stepped back into my room and shut the door. On second thoughts, I didn't lock it. I couldn't quite bring myself to do that. When I woke up in the dull, sunless heat in the next morning, I dressed and splashed my face with cold water and put on some lipstick and opened the door slowly. I think I still expected to see Doreen's body lying there in a pool of vomit like an ugly concrete testimony to my own dirty nature. But there was nobody in the hall. The carpet stretched from one end of the hall to the other, clean and eternally verdant except for a faint, irregular, dark stain before my door, as if somebody had by accident spilled a glass of water there, but dabbed it dry again. That was the end of chapter 2. Remember to drink responsibly? Yes, drink, but you see, Doreen asked her to go to the guy's house together, and then when Doreen started making out with her boobs out, like, hey, it's what's written, okay? I'm just repeating. Like Doreen's like super like drunk and like just, you know, being all flirtatious with the guy. Sylvia, okay. Listen, the Bell Jar is basically semi-autobiographical, but mostly autobiographical. There were people who, in the books that existed in real life said that the the pseudonyms that Sylvia Plath used for all the characters in for all the people in this book are so similar to their real name that everyone knows who she's writing about, and to an extent it breaks other people's friendship or something like that. So yeah, Sylvia Plath, in this book, she named herself Esther Greenwood. Esther Greenwood. But bear in mind, this is all happening in like early 1950s. So yeah, it's pretty wild. That's definitely pretty wild, I would say. Okay, that was chapter 2. Drunk woman, drunk young ladies, and got abandoned by her friend, who is the protagonist in this book. This is why I like this book. Esther Greenwood is not necessarily a good person. She's a very flawed person, but she's a person. She's a human being like all of us. There's never a perfect person. There's never like a good protagonist that is like perfect in every way possible, right? And I love it. I love that it's just her being her, and all the thoughts that she have in her head regarding her relationships with people, and later on her mother, and her love life and everything. It's all very flawed human being thinking, and that's what makes it so relatable and nice to read, I think. Okay, stop with my I'm gonna stop with my own judgment. I mean, not judgment. I'm gonna start with my own review of the book. I'm gonna continue chapter 3. So, for those who just joined in, hi. Welcome to my stream, or welcome to my reading session. We are currently reading The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. If you don't know about Sylvia Plath, she's a poet. She was a poet and a novelist, a writer, very accomplished, very accomplished writer. Very jealous of her. But she also died of suicide by the time she was only 30 years old. So yeah. Okay. So, The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, chapter 3. Arrayed on the ladies' day banquet table were yellow-green avocado pears, halves avocado be- sorry. Arrayed on the ladies' day banquet table were yellow-green avocado pear halves stuffed with crab meat and mayonnaise, and platters of rare roast beef and cold chicken, and every so often a cut glass bowl heaped with black caviar. I hadn't had time to eat any breakfast in the hotel cafeteria that morning, except for a cup of overstewed coffee so bitter it made my nose curl, and I was starving. Before I came to New York, I had never eaten out in a proper restaurant. I don't count Howard Johnson's, where I only had French fries and cheeseburgers and vanilla fraps with people like Buddy Willard. I'm not sure why it is, but I love food more than just about anything else. No matter how much I eat, I never put on weight. With one exception, I've been the same weight for 10 years. My favorite dishes were full of butter and cheese and sour cream. In New York, we had so many free luncheons with people on the magazines and various visiting celebrities. I developed the habit of running my eyes down those huge handwritten menus, where a tiny side dish of peas cost 50 or 60 cents, until I had picked the richest, most expensive dishes and ordered a string of them. We were always taken out on expense account, so I never felt guilty. I made a point of eating so fast I never kept the people waiting, who generally ordered just chef salads or grapefruit juice because they were trying to reduce. Almost everybody I met in New York was trying to reduce. I want to welcome the prettiest, smartest bunch of young ladies our staff has yet had the good luck to meet. The plump, bald master of ceremonies wheezed into his lapel microphone. This banquet is just a small sample of the hospitality our food testing kitchens here on Ladies' Day would like to offer in appreciation for your visit. A delicate, ladylike spatter of applause, and we all sat down at the enormous linen draped table. There were 11 of us girls from the magazine, together with most of our supervising editors and the whole kitchen staff of the Ladies' Day food testing kitchens in hygienic white smocks, neat hairnets, and flawless makeup of a uniform peach pie color. There were only 11 of us because Doreen was missing. They had set her place next to mine for some reason, and the chair was empty. I saved her place card for her, a pocket mirror with Doreen painted along the top of it in lacy script, and a wreath of frosted daisies around the edge, framing the silver hole where her face would show. Doreen was spending the day with Lenny Shepherd. She spent most of her free time with Lenny Shepherd now. In the hour before our luncheon at Ladies' Day, the big women's magazines that feature lush double-page spreads of Technicolor meals with a different theme and locale each month, we had been shown around the endless glossy kitchens and seen how difficult it is to photograph apple pie a la mode under bright lights because the ice cream keeps melting and has to be propped up from behind with toothpicks and changed every time it starts looking too soppy. The sight of all the food stacked in those kitchens made me dizzy. It's not that we hadn't had enough to eat at home. It's just that my grandmother always cooked economy joints and economy meatloaves and had the habit of saying, the minute you lift the first forkful to your mouth, I hope you enjoyed that. It cost 41 cents a pound, which always made me feel I was somehow eating pennies instead of Sunday roast. While we were standing up behind our chairs, listening to the welcome speech, I had bowed my head and secretly eyed the position of the bowls of caviar. One bowl was set One bowl was set strategically between me and Doreen's empty chair. I figured the girl across me couldn't reach it because of the mountainous centerpiece of marzipan, fruit, and Betsy on my right would be too nice to ask me to share it with her. If I just kept it out of the way at my elbow by my bread and butter plate. Besides, another bowl of caviar sat a little way to the right of the girl next to Betsy, and she could eat that. My grandfather and I had a standing joke. He was the head waiter at a country club near my hometown, and every Sunday my grandmother drove in to bring him home for his Monday off. My brother and I alternated going with her, and my grandfather always served Sunday supper to my grandmother and whichever of us was along as if we were regular club guests. He loved introducing me to special tidbits, and by the age of 9, I had developed a passionate taste for cold vichyssoise and caviar and anchovy paste. The joke was that at my wedding, my grandfather would see I had all the caviar I could eat. It was a joke because I never intended to get married, and even if I did, my grandfather couldn't have afforded enough caviar unless he robbed the country club kitchen and carried it off in a suitcase. Under cover of the clinking of water goblets and silverware and bone china, I paved my plate with chicken slices. Then I covered the chicken slices with caviar thickly, as if I were spreading peanut butter on a piece of bread. Then I picked up the chicken slices in my fingers. One by one, rolled them so the caviar wouldn't ooze off, and ate them. I had discovered After a lot After a lot of extreme apprehension about what spoons to use, that if you do something incorrect at table with a certain arrogance, as if you knew perfectly well you were doing it properly, you can get away with it, and nobody will think you are bad mannered or poorly brought up. They will think that you are original and very witty. I learned this trick the day JC took me to lunch with a famous poet. He wore a horrible, lumpy, speckled brown tweed jacket and grey pants and a red and blue checked open-throated jersey in a very formal restaurant full of fountains and chandeliers, where all the other men were dressed in dark suits and immaculate white shirts. This poet ate his salad with his fingers, leaf by leaf, while talking to me about the antitheses of nature and art. I couldn't take my eyes off the pale, stubby white fingers traveling back and forth, from the poet's salad to the poet's mouth, with one dripping lettuce leaf after another. Nobody giggled or whispered rude remarks. The poet made eating salad with your fingers seem to be the only natural and sensible thing to do. Why not, right? None of our magazine editors or the ladies' day staff members sat anywhere near me. And Betsy didn't and Betsy seemed sweet and friendly. She didn't even seem to like caviar, so I grew more and more confident. When I finished my first plate of cold chicken and caviar, I laid out another. Then I tackled the avocado and crab meat salad. Avocados are my favorite fruit. Every Sunday, my grandfather used to bring me an avocado pear hidden at the bottom of his briefcase under 6 soiled shirts and the Sunday comics. He taught me how to eat avocados by melting grape jelly and French dressing together in a saucepan and filling the cup of the pear with the garnet sauce. I felt homesick for that sauce. The crab meat tasted bland in comparison. How was the fur show? I asked Betsy, when I was no longer worried about competition over my caviar. I scraped the last few salty black eggs from the dish with my soup spoon and licked it clean. It was wonderful, Betsy smiled. They showed us how to make an all-purpose neckerchief out of mink tails and a gold chain, the sort of chain you can get an exact copy at Woolworths for $1.98. And Hilda nipped down the wholesale fur warehouses right afterwards and bought a bunch of mink tails at a big discount and dropped in at Woolworths and then stitched the whole thing together coming up on the bus. I peered over at Hilda, who sat on the other side of Betsy. Sure enough, she was wearing an expensive-looking scarf of furry tails fastened on one side by a dangling gilt chain. I never really understood Hilda. She was 6 feet tall with huge slanted green eyes and thick red lips and a vacant Slavic expression. She made hats. She was apprenticed to the fashion editor, which set her apart from the more literary one among us like Doreen and Betsy and myself, who all wrote columns. Even if some of them were only about health and beauty, I don't know if Hilda could read, but she made startling hats. She went to a special school for making hats in New York, and every day she wore a new hat to work, constructed by her own hands out of bits of straws or fur or ribbon or veiling in subtle, bizarre shades. That's amazing, I said. Amazing. I missed Doreen. She would have murmured some fine, scalding remark about Hilda's miraculous fur piece to cheer me up. I felt very low. I had been unmasked only that morning by JC herself, and I felt now that all the uncomfortable suspicion I had about myself were coming true. And I couldn't hide the truth much longer. After 19 years of running after good marks and prizes and grants of one sort and another, I was letting up, slowing down, dropping clean out of the race. Why didn't you come along to the first show with us? Betsy asked. I had the impression she was repeating herself, and that she asked me the same question a minute ago, only I couldn't have been listening. Did you go off with Doreen? No, I said. I wanted to go to the first show, but JC called up and made me come into the office. That wasn't quite true about wanting to go to the show, but I tried to convince myself now that it was true. So I could be really wounded about what JC had done. I told Betsy how I had been lying in bed that morning planning to go to the first show. What I didn't tell her was that Doreen had come into my room earlier and said, What do you want to go to that assy show for? Lenny and I are going to Coney Island. Why don't you come along? Lenny can get you a nice fellow. The day's shot to hell anyhow with that luncheon and then the film premiere in the afternoon, so nobody will miss us. For a minute I was tempted. The show certainly did seem stupid. I have never cared for furs. What I decided to do in the end was to lie in bed as long as I wanted to and then go to Central Park and spend the day lying in the grass, the longest grass I could find in that bald, duck-ponded wilderness. I told Doreen I would not go to the show or the luncheon or the film premiere, but that I would not go to Coney Island either. I would stay in bed. After Doreen left, I wondered why I couldn't go the whole way doing what I should anymore. This made me sad and tired. Then I wondered why I couldn't go the whole way doing what I shouldn't, the way Doreen did, and this made me even sadder and more tired. I didn't know what time it was, but I had heard the girls bustling and calling in the hall and getting ready for the first show, and then I heard the hall go still. And as I lay on my back in the bed, staring up at the blank white ceiling, the stillness seemed to grow bigger and bigger until I felt my eardrums would burst with it. Then the phone rang. I stared at the phone for a minute. The receiver shook a bit in its bone-colored cradle, so I could tell it was really ringing. I thought I might have given my phone number to somebody at a dance or a party, then forgotten clean about it. I lifted the receiver and spoke in a husky receptionist voice. Hello? JC here, JC rapped out with brutal promptitude. I wondered if you happened to be planning to come into the office today. I sank into the sheets. I couldn't understand why JC thought I would be coming into the office. We had these mimeographed schedule cards so we could keep track of all our activities, and we spent a lot of mornings and afternoons away from the office going to affairs in town. Of course, some of the affairs were optimal. There was quite a pause. Then I said meekly, I thought I was going to the first show. Of course, I hadn't thought any of such thing, but I couldn't figure out what else to say. I told her, I thought I was going to the first show, I said to Betsy, but she told me to come into the office. She wanted to have a little talk with me, and there was some work to do. Oh, Betsy said sympathetically. She might have seen the tears that plopped down into my dessert dish of meringue and brandy ice cream, because she pushed over her own untouched dessert, and I started absently on that when I finished my own. I felt a bit awkward about the tears, but they were real though. JC had said some terrible things to me. When I made my entrance into the office at about 10 o'clock, JC stood up and came round her desk to shut the door, and I sat in the swivel chair in front of my typewriter table facing her, and she sat in the swivel chair behind her desk facing me, with the window full of potted plants, shelf after shelf of them springing up at her back like a tropical garden. Doesn't your work interest you, Esther? Oh, it does, it does, I said. It interests me very much. I felt like yelling the words as if that might make them more convincing, but I controlled myself. All my life, I have told myself studying and reading and writing and working like mad was what I wanted to do. And it actually seemed to be true. I did everything well enough and got all A's, and by the time I made it to college, nobody could stop me. I was college correspondent for the town gazette and editor for the literary magazine and secretary of honor board, which deals with academics and social offenses and punishments, and a popular office, and I had a well-known woman poet and professor on the faculty championing me for graduate school at the biggest universities in the East, and promises of full scholarships all the way, and now I was apprenticed to the best editor on any intellectual fashion magazine, and what did I do but balk and balk like a dull cart horse? I am very interesting in everything. The words fell with a hollow flatness on JC's desk like so many wooden nickels. I'm glad of that, JC said in a bit waspishly. You can learn a lot in this month on the magazine, you know, if you just roll up your shirt cuffs. The girl who was here before you didn't bother with any of the show stuff. She went straight from this office to Time. My, I said in the same sepulchral tone. That was quick. Of course, you have another year at college yet, JC went on a little more mildly. What do you have in mind after you graduate? What I always thought I had in mind was getting some big scholarship to graduate school or a grant to study all over Europe. And then I thought I would be a professor and write books of poems and write books of poems and be an editor of some sort. Usually, I had these plans on the tip of my tongue. I don't really know, I heard myself say. I felt a deep shock hearing myself say that, because the minute I said it, I knew it was true. It sounded true, and I recognized it. The way you recognize some nondescript person that's been hanging around your door for ages and then suddenly comes up and introduces himself as your real father and looks exactly like you, so you know he really is your father, and the person you thought all your life was your father was a sham. I don't really know. You never get anywhere like that. JC paused. What languages do you have? I can read a bit of French, I guess, and I've always wanted to learn German. I've been telling people I had always wanted to learn German for about 5 years. My mother spoke German during her childhood in America and was stoned for it during the First World War by children at school. My German-speaking father, dead since I was 9, came from some manic depressive hamlet in the black heart of Prussia. My younger brother was at the moment on the experiment in international living in Berlin and speaking German like a native. What I didn't say was that each time I pick up a German dictionary or a German book, the very sight of those dense black barbed wire letters made my mind shut up like clam. I've always thought I would like to go into publishing. I tried to recover a thread that might lead me back to my old bright salesmanship. I guess what I'll do is apply at some publishing house. You ought to read French and German, JC said mercilessly. And probably several other languages as well. Spanish and Italian. Better still, Russian. Hundreds of girls flood into New York every June thinking they'll be editors. You need to offer something more than the run-of-the-mill person. You better learn some languages. I hadn't had the heart to tell JC there wasn't one scrap of space on my senior year schedule to learn languages in. I was taking one of those honors programs that teaches you to think independently, except for a course in Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. My God, sorry, Russian's difficult. And seminar in advanced poetry composition. I would spend my whole time writing on some obscure theme in some works of James Joyce. I hadn't picked out my theme yet because I hadn't got around to reading Finnegan's Wake, but my professor was very excited about my thesis and had promised to give me some leads on images about twins. I'll see what I can do, I told JC. I probably might just fit in one of those double barrel accelerated courses in elementary German they have rigged up. I thought that at the time I might actually do this. I had a way of persuading my class dean to let me do irregular things. She regarded me as a sort of interesting experiment. At college, I had to take a required course in physics and chemistry. I had already taken a course in botany and done very well. I never answered one test question wrong the whole year, and for a while I toyed with the idea of being a botanist and studying in the wild grasses in Africa or the South American rainforest because you can win big grants to study offbeat things like that in the queer areas much more easily than winning grants to study art in Italy or English in England. There's not so much competition. Botany was fine because I love cutting up leaves and putting them up under the microscope and drawing diagrams of bread molds and the odd heart-shaped leaf in the sex cycle of the fern. It seemed so real to me. The day I went into physics class, it was death. Same, I understand that. A short dark man with a high lisping voice named Mr. Manzi stood in front of the class in a tight blue suit holding a little wooden ball. He put the ball on the steep grooved slide and let it run down to the bottom. Then he started talking about let A equal acceleration and let A equal acceleration and let T equal time, and suddenly he was scribbling letters and numbers and equal signs all over the blackboards, and my mind went dead. I understand that feeling. I took the physics book on back to my dormitory. It was a huge book on porous mimeograph paper, 400 pages long with no drawings or photographs, only diagrams and formulas between brick red cardboard covers. This book was written by Mr. Manzi to explain physics to college girls, and if it worked on us, he would try to have it published. Well, I studied those formulas. I went to the class and watched balls roll down slides and listened to the bell rings, and by the end of the semester, most of the other girls had failed and I had a straight A. I heard Mr. Manzi saying to a bunch of girls who were complaining that the course was too hard, "No, it can't be too hard because one girl got a straight A." "Who is it? Tell us," they said. But he shook his head and didn't say anything and gave me a sweet little conspiring smile. That's what gave me the idea of escaping the next semester of chemistry. I may have made a straight A in physics, but I was panic-struck. Physics made me sick the whole time I learned it. What I couldn't stand was this shrinking everything into letters and numbers instead of leaf shapes and enlarged diagrams of holes in the leaves breathed through and fascinating words like carotene and xanthophyll on the blackboards. There was this hideous, cramped, scorpion lettered formulas in Mr. Manzi's special red chalk. I knew chemistry would be worse because I had seen a big chart of the 90 odd elements hung up in the chemistry lab, and all the perfectly good words like gold and silver and cobalt and aluminum were shortened to ugly abbreviations with different decimals numbers after them. If I had to if I had to strain my brain with any more of that stuff, I would go mad. I would fail outright. It was only by a horrible effort of will that I had dragged myself through the first half of the year. So, I went to the class dean with my clever plan. My plan was that I needed the time to take a course in Shakespeare. Since I was, after all, an English major, she knew and I perfectly she knew and I knew perfectly well I would get a straight A again in chemistry course. So, what was the point of my taking the exams? Why couldn't I just go to the classes and look on and take it all in and forget about marks and credits? It was a case of honor among honorable people, and the content meant more than the form, and the marks were really a bit silly anyway, weren't they? When you knew you would always get an A. My plan was strengthened by the fact that the college had just dropped the second year of required science for the classes after me anyway. So, my class was the last to suffer under the old ruling. Mr. Manzi was in perfect agreement with my plan. I think it flattered him that I enjoyed his classes so much I would take them for no materialistic reasons like credit and an A, but for the sheer beauty of chemistry itself. I thought it was quite ingenious of me to suggest sitting in on the chemistry course even after I had changed over to Shakespeare. It was quite an unnecessary gesture and made it seem I simply couldn't bear to give chemistry up. Of course, I would never have succeeded with this scheme if I had not made that A in the first place. And if my class dean known how scared and depressed I was, and how I seriously contemplated desperate remedies such as getting a doctor's certificate that I was unfit to study chemistry, the formulas made me dizzy, and so on, I'm sure she wouldn't have listened to me for a minute, but would have made me take the course regardless. As it happened, the faculty board passed my petition, and the class dean told me later that several of the professors were touched by it. They took it as a real step in intellectual maturity. I had to laugh when I thought about the rest of that year. I went to chemistry 5 times a week and didn't miss a single one. Mr. Manzi stood at the bottom of the big rickety old amphitheater, making blue flames and red flares and clouds of yellow stuff by pouring the contents of one test tube into another, and I shut his voice out of my ears by pretending it was only a mosquito in the distance, and sat back enjoying the bright lights and the colored fires, and wrote page after page of villainies and sonnets. Mr. Manzi would glance at me now and then and see me writing, and send up a sweet little appreciative smile. I guess he thought I was writing down all the formulas not for exam time like the other girls, but because his presentation fascinated me so much I couldn't help it. That was chapter 3. That was a very nice, like, I mean, it's not, I don't want to say smooth, but that was a nice chapter to read, kind of. I enjoyed that. Oh, sorry. That was loud. I enjoyed that very much. Let's take a short break. Okay. One short break. I'll be right back. Okay. I think one more chapter we will stop there, I think. One more chapter. Alright, to those who have just joined in, we are currently reading The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, Chapter 4. I don't know why my successful evasion of chemistry should have floated into my mind there in JC's office. All the time she talked to me, I saw Mr. Manzi standing on thin air in the back of JC's head like something conjured out of a hat, holding his little wooden ball and the test tube that billowed a great cloud of yellow smoke the day before Easter vacation and smelt of rotten eggs and made all the girls and Mr. Manzi laugh. I felt sorry for Mr. Manzi. I felt like I felt like going down to him on my hands and knees and apologizing for being such an awful liar. Jay-Z handed me a pile of story manuscript and spoke to me much more kindly. I spent the rest of the morning reading stories and typing out what I thought of them on the pink interoffice memo sheets and sending them into the office of Betsy's editor to be read by Betsy the next day. JC interrupted me now and then to tell me something practical or a bit of gossip. JC was going to lunch that noon with two famous writers, a man and a lady. That man had just sold 6 short stories to the New Yorker and 6 to JC. This surprised me, as I didn't know magazines bought stories in lots of 6, and I was staggered by the thought of the amount of money 6 stories would probably bring in. JC said she had to be very careful at this lunch because the lady writer wrote stories too, but she never had any in the New Yorker and JC had only taken one from her in 5 years. JC had to flatter the more famous man at the same time as she was careful not to hurt the less famous lady. When the chirps in JC's French wall waved their wings up and down and put the little gilt trumpets to their lips and pinged out 12 notes one after the other, JC told me I had done enough work for the day and to go off to the ladies' day tour and banquet and to film the premiere and she would see me bright and early tomorrow. Then she slipped a suit jacket over her lilac blouse, pinned a hat of imitation lilacs on top of her head, powdered her nose briefly, and adjusted her thick spectacles. She looked terrible, but very wise. As she left the office, she patted my shoulder and with one lilac gloved hand. "Don't let the wicked city get you down." I sat quietly in my swivel chair for a few minutes and thought about JC. I tried to imagine what it would be like if I were E.G., the famous editor, in an office full of potted rubber plants and African violets my secretary had to water each morning. I wish I had a mother like JC. Then I would know what to do. My own mother wasn't much help. My mother had taught shorthand and typing to support us ever since my father died. My mother had taught shorthand and typing to support us ever since my father died, and secretly she hated it and hated him for dying and leaving no money behind because he didn't trust life insurance salesmen. She was always on to me to learn shorthand after college, so I would have a practical skill as well as a college degree. Even the apostles were tent makers, she said. They had to live just the way we do. I dabbled my fingers in the bowl of warm water a lady's waiter sat down in place of my 2 empty ice cream dishes. Then I wiped each finger carefully with my linen napkin, which was still quite clean. Then I folded the linen napkin and laid it between my lips and brought my lips down on it precisely. Then I put the napkin back on the table, a fuzzy pink lip-shaped bloom right in the middle of it like a tiny heart. I thought, what a long way I had come. The first time I saw a fingerboard was at the home of my benefactress. It was a custom at my college. The little freckled lady in the scholarship office told me to write to the person whose scholarship you had, if they were still alive, and thank them for it. I had the scholarship of Philomena Guinea, a wealthy novelist who went to my college in the early 1900s and had her first novel made into a silent film with Bette Davis, as well as a radio serial that was still running. And it turned out that she was still alive and lived in a large mansion not far from my grandfather's country club. So I wrote Philomena Guinea a long letter in coal-black ink and on grey paper, with the name of the college embossed on it in red. I wrote what the leaves looked like in autumn when I bicycled out into the hills, and how wonderful it was to live on a campus instead of commuting by bus to the city college and having to live at home, and how all knowledge was opening up before me, and perhaps one day I would be able to write great books the way she did. I had read one of Mrs. Guinea's books in the town library. The college library didn't stock them for some reason, and it was crammed from beginning to end with long, suspenseful questions. Would Evelyn discern that Gladys knew Roger in her past? Wondered Hector feverishly. And how could Donald marry her when he learned of the child Elsie hidden away with Mrs. Rollopp on the secluded country farm? Griselda demanded on her bleak moonlit pillow. Those books earned Philomena Guinea, who later told me she had been very stupid at college, millions and millions of dollars. Mrs. Guinea answered my letter and invited me to lunch at her home, and that was where I first saw my fingerbowl. That was when I first saw a fingerbowl. The water had a few cherry blossoms floating in it. I thought it must be some sort of Japanese after-dinner soup and ate every bit of it, including the crisp little blossoms. Mrs. Guinea never said anything, and it was only much later when I told a debutante that I knew at college about the dinner that I learned what I had done. When we came out of the sunnily lit interior of the Ladies' Day offices, the streets were grey and fuming with rain. It wasn't the nice kind of rain that rinses you clean, but the sort of rain I imagine they must have in Brazil. It flew straight down from the sky in drops the size of coffee saucers, and hit the hot sidewalks with a hiss that sent clouds of steam wreathing up from the gleaming dark concrete. My secret hope of spending the afternoon alone in Central Park died in the glass egg beater of Ladies' Day revolving doors. I found myself spewed out through the warm rains and into the dim, throbbing cave of the cab, together with Betsy and Hilda and Emily Ann Offenbach, a prim little girl with a bun of red hair, and her husband and 3 children in Teaneck, New Jersey. The movie was very poor. It starred a nice blonde girl who looked like June Allison but really was somebody else, and a sexy black-haired girl who looked like Elizabeth Taylor but was also somebody else, and 2 big broad-shoulders boneheads with names like Rick and Gil. It was a football romance, and it was in Technicolor. I hate Technicolor. Everybody in Technicolor movies seems to feel obliged to wear a lurid new costume in new scenes and to stand out like clothes horse, with a lot of very green trees and very yellow wheat and very blue ocean rolling away for miles and miles in every direction. Most of the action in this picture took place in the football stands, with the two girls waving and cheering in smart suits with orange chrysanthemums the size of cabbages on their lapels, or in a ballroom where the girls swoop across the floor with their dates in dresses like something out of Gone with the Wind, and then sneak off into powder rooms to say nasty, intense things to each other. Finally, I could see the nice girl was going to end up with the nice football hero, and the sexy girl was going to end up with nobody because the man named Gil had only wanted a mistress and not a wife all along, and was now packing off to Europe on a single ticket. At about this point, I began to feel peculiar. I looked around me at all the rows of wrapped little heads with the same silver glow on them in front and the same black shadow on them at the back. And they look like nothing more or less than a lot of stupid moonbrains. I felt in a terrible danger of puking. I didn't know whether it was the awful movie giving me a stomach ache or all the caviar that I had eaten. I'm going back to the hotel, I whispered to Betsy through the half-dark. Betsy was staring at the screen with deadly concentration. Don't you feel good? She whispered, barely moving her lips. No, I said. I feel like hell. So do I. I'll come back with you. We slipped out of our seats and said, excuse me, down the length of our row, while the people grumbled and hissed and shifted their rain boots and umbrellas to let us pass, because it took my mind. Let us pass, and I stepped on as many feet as I could because it took my mind off this enormous desire to puke that was ballooning up in front of me so fast I couldn't see around it. The remains of a tepid rain was still sifting down when we stepped out into the streets. Betsy looked affrighted. The bloom was gone from her cheeks, and her face, and her drained face floated in front of me, green and sweating. We fell into one of those yellow checkered cabs that were always waiting at the curb when you are trying to decide whether or not you want a taxi. And by the time we reached the hotel, I had puked twice and Betsy had puked once. The cab driver took the corners with such momentum that we were thrown together, first on one side of the back seat and then on the other. Each time one of us felt sick, she would lean over quietly as if she had dropped something and was picking it up from the floor, and the other one would hum a little and pretend to be looking out of the window. The cab driver seemed to know what we were doing, even so. Hey, he protested, driving through a light that had just turned red. You can't do that in my cab. You better get out and do it in the street. But we didn't say anything, and I guess he figured out we were almost at the hotel, so he didn't make us get out until we pulled up in front of the main entrance. We didn't dare to wait to add up the fares. We stuffed a pile of silver into the cabbie's hand and dropped a couple of Kleenexes to cover the mess on the floor, and ran in through the lobby onto the empty elevator. Luckily for us, it was the quiet time of the day. Betsy was sick again in the elevator and I held her head, and then I was sick and she held mine. Usually after a good puke, you feel better right away. We hugged each other and then said goodbye and went off to our opposite ends of the hall to lie down in our own rooms. There's nothing like puking with somebody to make you into old friends. Sorry, that was so good. But the minute I had shut the door behind me and undressed and dragged myself onto the bed, I felt worse than ever. I felt I had to go to the toilet. I struggled into my white bathrobe and the blue cornflowers on it and staggered down into the bathroom. Betsy was already there. I could hear her groaning behind the door, so I hurried on a round corner to the bathroom in the next wing. I thought she would die. It was so far. I sat on the toilet, leaned my head over the edge of the washbowl, and I thought I was losing my guts and dinner both. The sickness rolled through me in great waves. After each wave, it would fade away and leave me limp and as a wet leaf and shivering all over, and then I would feel it rising up in me again, and the glittering white torture chamber tiles under my feet over my head and on all four sides closed in and squeezed me into pieces. I don't know how long I kept at it. I let the cold water in the bowl go on running loudly with the stopper out, so anybody came by would think I was washing my clothes. And then, when I felt reasonably safe, I stretched out on the floor and lay quite still. It didn't seem to be summer anymore. I could feel the winter shaking my bones and banging my teeth together, and the big white hotel towel I had dragged down with me lay under, head numb as a snowdrift. I thought it very bad manners for anybody to pound on the bathroom door the way some person was pounding. They could just go around the corner and find another bathroom the way I had done and leave me in peace. But a person kept banging and pleading with me to let them in, and I thought I dimly recognized the voice. It sounded a bit like Emily Ann Offenbach. "Just a minute," I said then. My words bungled out, thick as molasses. I pulled myself together and slowly rose and flushed the toilet for the 10th time and slopped the bowl clean and rolled up the towel so the vomit stains didn't show up very clearly, and unlocked the door and stepped out into the hall. I knew it would be fatal if I looked at Emily Ann or anybody else, so I fixed my eyes glassily on the window that swam at the end of the hall and put one foot in front of the other. And the next thing I had a view of was somebody's shoes. It was a stout shoe of cracked black leather and quite old, and with tiny air holes in a scallop pattern over the toe and dull polished, and it was pointed at me. It seemed to be placed on a hard green surface that was hurting my right cheekbone. I kept very still, waiting for a clue that would give me some notion of what to do. A little to the left of the shoe I saw a vague heap of blue cornflowers on a white ground, and this made me want to cry. It was the sleeve of my own bathrobe I was looking at, and my left hand lay pale as a cod at the end of it. "She's all right now." The voice came from a cool, rational region far above my head. For a minute, I didn't think there was anything strange about it, and then I thought it was strange. It was a man's voice, and no men were allowed to be in our hotel at any time of the day or night. "How many others are there?" the voice went on. I listened with interest. The floor seemed wonderfully solid. It was comforting to know I had fallen and I could fall no farther. 11, I think," a woman's voice answered. I figured she must belong to the black shoe. "I think there's 11 of them, but one's missing, so there's only 10. "Well, you get this one to bed and I'll take care of the rest." I heard a hollow boom boom in my right ear and grew fainter and fainter. Then a door opened in distance and there were voices and groans and the door shut again. 2 hands slid under my armpit and the woman's voice said, Come, lovely. Come, lovey. We'll make it yet." And I felt myself being half lifted, and slowly the doors began to move by one, until we came to an open door and went in. The sheet on my bed was folded back, and the woman helped me lie down and covered me up to my chin and rested for a minute in the bedside armchair, fanning herself with one plump pink hand. She wore gilt-rimmed spectacles and a white nurse cap. "Who are you?" I asked in a faint voice. "I'm the hotel nurse. What's the matter with me?" "Poison," she said briefly. "Poison. The whole lot of you. I've never seen anything like it. Sick here, sick there. Whatever have you young ladies have been stuffing yourself with?" "Is everybody else sick too?" I asked with some hope. "The whole of your lot," she affirmed with relish. "Sick as dogs and crying for ma." The room hovered around me with great gentleness, as if the chairs and the tables and the walls were withholding their weight out of sympathy for my sudden frailty. The doctor's given you an injection, the nurse said from the doorway. You sleep now. And the door took her place like a sheet of blank paper, and then a larger sheet of paper took the place of the door, and I drifted toward it and I smiled myself to sleep. Somebody was standing by my pillow with a white cup. Drink this, they said. I shook my head. The pillow crackled like a wad of straw. Drink this and you'll feel better. A thin white china cup was lowered under my nose. In the wan light that might have been evening and might have dawn, I contemplated the clear amber fluid. Pads of butter floated on the surface, and a faint chickeny aroma fumed up to my nostril. My eyes moved tentatively to the skirt behind the cup. Betsy, I said. Betsy nothing, it's me. I raised my eyes then, and I saw Doreen's head silhouetted against the paling window. Her blonde hair lit at the tips from behind like a halo of gold. Her face was in shadow, so I couldn't make out her expression. But I felt a sort of expert tenderness flowing from the ends of her fingers. She might have been Betsy, or my mother, or a fern-scented nurse. I bent my head and took a sip of the broth. I thought my mouth must be made of sand. I took another sip, and then another, and another, until the cup was empty. I felt purged and holy and ready for a new life. Doreen set the cup on the windowsill and lowered herself into the armchair. I noticed that she made no move to take out a cigarette, and as she was a chain smoker, this surprised me. Well, you almost died, she said finally. I guess it was all that caviar. Caviar nothing. Caviar nothing. It was the crab meat. They did tests on it and was chock full of ptomaine. I had a vision of celestially white kitchens on Ladies' Day stretching into infinity. I saw avocado pear after avocado pear being stuffed with crab meat and mayonnaise and photographed under brilliant lights. I saw the delicate pink mottled claw meat poking seductively through its blanket of mayonnaise, and the bland yellow pear cup with its rim of alligator green cradling the whole mess. Poison. Who did the test? I thought the doctor might have pumped somebody's stomach and then analyzed what he found in his hotel laboratory. Those dodos on Ladies' Day. As soon as you all started killing over like 9 pins, somebody called into the office, and the office called across the Ladies' Day, and they did tests on everything left over from the big lunch. I echoed hollowly. It was good to have Doreen back. They sent presents, she added. They're in big cartons out in the hall. How did they get here so fast? Special express delivery. What do you think? They can't afford to have the lot of you running around saying you got poisoned at Ladies' Day. You could sue them for every penny they own if you just knew how some smart lawman. What are the presents? I began to feel if it was good enough present, I wouldn't mind about what happened, because I felt so pure as a result. Nobody's opened the box yet. They are all out flat. I'm supposed to be carting soup to everybody, saying that I'm the only one on my feet. But I brought you yours first. See what the present is, I begged. Then I remembered and said, I have a present for you as well. Doreen went out into the hall. I could hear her rustling around for a minute, and then the sound of paper tearing finally. Finally, she came back carrying a thick book with a glossy cover and people's names printed all over it. The 30 best short stories of the year. She dropped the book in my lap. There's 11 more of them out there in that box. I suppose they thought it would give you something to read while you are sick. She paused. Where's mine? I fished in my pocketbook and handed Doreen the mirror with her name and the daisies on it. Doreen looked at me and I looked at her, and we both burst out laughing. You can have my soup if you want, she said. They put 12 soups in a tray by mistake, and Lenny and I stuffed down so many hot dogs. While we were waiting for the rain to stop, I couldn't eat another mouthful. Bring it in, I said. I'm starving. And that's all for today. 2 hours is good now. I shouldn't do more. I shouldn't do more. That's very good. 4 chapters reading, I think. I enjoyed it very much. I mean, I already read the book. I'm just rereading it, and I think I'm enjoying it a lot. So far. I style my avatar to look like I'm from the 50s. You know how in the 50s they all have like, curl up short hair like this? Not like this, but and also dresses. The very 50s flared out dresses. Anyway, yeah, that's for today. If I feel good, I'll do another reading tomorrow. But I think a good 2 hours reading is good enough. Oh, thank you, Smoothie. It's Spooty. Sorry, I was calling smoothies. Thank you, Spooty. Thank you. Thank you for dropping by. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to my Holly Wing. I haven't seen you in a while. Thank you for Holly Wing. Thank you to Ando. I don't know if Ando's still here. Thank you to Spooty. Thank you to Karisu. Karisu. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. But it does get very depressing as it goes on. But it gives you like a glimpse of like, the 50s society, like New York. Generally the 50s societal, like how people talk or what people say, but it's like it feels almost like it can happen like in nowadays, like aside from the lack of like smartphones, and I don't know, they're still taking cabs, they're still cycling, they're still walking. It's very nice. It's interesting to me. Yeah. Also enjoy my lalafell, please. I only did my party finder for like one round, so that's why not a lot of people are here. But it's okay. It's okay. As long as very few of you enjoy my reading, I'm happy enough. Yeah. Good. I think it's I think 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock is a good reading time. If it's not like early morning. What do you think? Is this an awkward time? Is there ever a good time for me to read? I actually don't know. I really don't know. What have you guys been up to this new year? I've been doing nothing. Actually, New Year is just like any other. January is like any other month, except I have to run a lot of errands. This month I have to like renew my car insurance, I have to renew my road tax. That's like going out a lot, and I hate going out. I like to stay home. Yeah, but I've also been like working a lot, I think. Yeah. But I picked that I was being it's not that I wanted to take a break, but I was like I took a break from like yoga for like a whole month, and I really miss it. But I'm going to go, but it's gonna the classes are starting back, It happens because the teacher that I like took like a whole month off from work, so I have to wait for her to come back, and she's back now, so now I can go back to her class, and I'm very happy about that. And then I also picked up something new this year, pickleball. Everyone's playing pickleball. Everyone is playing pickleball. Uh, so I just wanted to join the fun, and it's really fun. It's seriously very fun. It's like I truly need it because I need to get like I need to get add in some cardio into like my workout, so get my heart rate up. So I have to um yeah, pickleball is nice. It's basically like combination of badminton and tennis, but not as intense as tennis, and not as jumpy as badminton. There's a lot of jumping for badminton. This one is like everything is hit below your waist level, so not everything like the starting one or the. It's nice. I mean, there's so many rules to pickleball. I don't even know if I'm playing it right, but you know what? It doesn't matter as long as you have fun. It's not like I'm going out to a competition, right? Just chilling, get my heart rates up, jump like run around a little bit. I think I spend more time like chasing after a ball than hitting the ball. But hey, I'm a beginner. Anyways, go and get dinner, you guys. I know you guys are hungry. Or go and get breakfast. Pure awkward, I'm talking to myself. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to me today. I really appreciate it. Every time I thought that nobody's gonna be here, you guys are always here, and for that I really really appreciate it. Yeah, I'll try to read better next time. I think I'm a bit like nervous, so I like a lot of words get jumbled up, and then like and like you know Russian names like Litovsky, and it's pretty challenging at times. My vocabulary is not that great. I mean, it's okay. Could be better. That's why I read. That's why we read. You enhance your vocabulary, and also and just be better in English by reading. And if you don't want to read, listen to me read. But then the bad thing about listening to me read is that sometimes I react to what I read, and then I will like stop for a bit. So that's not very nice. But hope you guys don't mind. I like the part when I was trying to speak in a Boston I was like attempting a Boston accent. It cracks me up because I sound stupid. I know for a fact that I sound stupid. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. I don't know what to do. I'm mostly streaming like rating content nowadays, which is not the point of my. I feel like Noodible should be like my niche thing, right? But I've just been like streaming rating stuff now. But then I don't know if anyone's actually interested in watching me rate because it's like so tedious. You're just watching a person attempting to do the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again. So I don't know if that's actually entertaining to anyone to watch. I really should finish Yakuza 6 so I can do Yakuza 7. I also want to play Baldur's Gate with yeah. I have a lot of things that I want to do. But like whether my mental energy is like enough to like tackle all of these things that I want to do is another issue. Um, I'm trying my best. I think we are all trying our best, right? And I hope, I do hope we are all trying our best. And acknowledge that we are trying our best. Because sometimes I am so hard on myself that I forget that I am trying my best. I don't know if that makes sense. Hey, if nothing makes sense, never mind. As long as you enjoy it. Okay. I'll be back soon. I try on... Today is what day? Oh fuck, it's Thursday? Yeah, time passed so fast, huh? Way too fast. Okay, if tomorrow I am free in the afternoon around the same time, 4 to 6 GMT plus 8. Oh no, yeah, I think I can, yes. I will continue reading. Okay? Until then, thank you so much for hanging out with me. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for everything. Thank you so much for being here with me. Each and every one of you, even if you drop by and then not here anymore, I still appreciate you. Until the next time, I'll see you again. Bye bye. I'll see you again. Maybe tomorrow. Bye bye bye. Bye 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 bye. Bye 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 bye.